Some nights you just know something is off, even if you can't explain why. That night at my parents' house, I should have trusted that feeling. But instead, I smiled, I hugged, and I walked right into it. It was our monthly family dinner, a tradition we'd kept alive since I was a teenager. No matter how busy life got, once a month everyone gathered under my parents' roof. It was supposed to feel safe, familiar, comforting. But that night, the air in the house felt heavier somehow, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Claire was there, radiant as always, sitting proudly beside her new husband, Mark. They had only been married for a few months, still in that blissful honeymoon phase where you could practically see the sparkle in their eyes, or at least that's what I thought. At first, the evening started normally. Mom, Linda bustling around the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, her voice sharp but loving. Dad James, setting up the grill outside chatting with Dylan about football. I wandered around with a glass of wine in hand, letting the familiar rhythm of family soothe me. But then dinner started and the unease crept in. Mark was sitting across from me, just a little too close. At first, it was subtle small comments that could easily be brushed off. "You look amazing tonight," he said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off. He was probably just being nice, right? We were family now. Compliments were normal, but then the compliments kept coming and they stopped being harmless. "You always had the best figure," he said, eyes flicking over me in a way that made my skin crawl. If I had met you first, who knows what could have happened? I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. Did he just say that? I glanced around the table, desperate for someone to catch it, to call it out, to save me? But everyone was absorbed in their own conversations, laughing, eating, talking about work and vacations and the latest neighborhood gossip. Was I imagining it? I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Mark wouldn't stop. He leaned in closer, his knee brushing mine under the table. Deliberate, unmistakable. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and demand someone, anyone, tell me this wasn't happening. But instead, I smiled tightly, excused myself to the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I stared at myself in the mirror, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Was this real? Was I overreacting? Was there some reasonable explanation that I just couldn't see? After a few minutes, I forced myself to breathe, splash cold water on my face, and paste a polite smile back on. I returned to the table, made some excuse about not feeling well, and left before dessert was even served. Driving home that night, I kept replaying everything in my head. The comments, the touches, the way nobody seemed to notice, or worse, chose to ignore it. The house felt eerily silent when I walked in, like even the walls were holding their breath with me. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat down on the edge of the couch, and stared into the darkness. It wasn't just what Mark had said that made my skin crawl. It was how easily he had done it, how comfortable he had felt saying those things with my sister, his wife sitting just a few feet away. Something was horribly wrong. I needed to tell someone. I needed to tell Claire. So with trembling fingers, I typed out a text. "Hey Claire, I don't really know how to say this, but Mark made some comments tonight that made me really uncomfortable. It's bothering me a lot, especially because he said them in front of everyone. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I needed you to know if you don't feel comfortable addressing it, I can talk to him directly." I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send, and then nothing. No response. Not that night, not even the next morning. I spent the night tossing and turning, the silence louder than any words could have been. At one point, around 2 a.m., I even picked up my phone to call Ethan, my boyfriend, who was away on a work trip, but I chickened out. I didn't want to bother him with something that maybe I was overreacting about. But deep down, I knew that even if nobody else saw it, even if nobody else said anything, what happened at that table was real, and it had changed everything. By the time Claire finally texted back asking if we could meet up and talk, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. An apology, an explanation, a way to fix this mess and pretend it never happened. All I knew was that the sister I loved, the sister I trusted, owed me something. And I wasn't sure if she even realized it. I met Claire the next afternoon at a little cafe we used to love when we were kids. Funny, isn't it? How places that once held good memories can start to feel haunted when trust is broken. I spotted her sitting by the window, stirring a cup of tea absent-mindedly. She looked up, gave me a small, strained smile. Not the kind that says, "I'm sorry," or "I understand." Just polite, distant. I slid into the seat across from her, feeling my heart pounding in my ears. For a few seconds, we just sat there in silence. The noise of the cafe cups, clinking quiet conversations, soft indie music filled the space between us. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "So, you passed?" I blinked. "Past what?" She smiled like it was obvious. The test, she said, simply taking a sip of her tea. I needed to know if I could trust you. The words didn't register at first. A test? What was she talking about? Seeing my confusion, she leaned in a little, lowering her voice like we were conspiring about something harmless. I asked Mark to flirt with you to see how you'd react. I stared at her, my mouth slightly open, unable to form a response. She went on so casually, it made my skin crawl. After what happened with Alex, you know my first marriage, I couldn't just blindly trust anymore. I had to be sure. And you passed. You didn't flirt back. You even messaged me after. That's good. That's good. I sat there stunned as the memories of the night before flooded back Mark's lingering looks. His disgusting comments, the way I'd felt, dirty ashamed, violated, all orchestrated. Planned approved by my own sister, Claire. I said, my voice shaking. You had your husband sexually harass me to test my loyalty. She frowned like I was being dramatic. It wasn't harassment, it was just words, you're fine. Fine, like my feelings were some minor inconvenience she could brush aside. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. You really thought I'd betray you? I whispered. Her face tightened. You introduced me to Alex, she said sharply. You vouched for him. You let him into our lives, and look how that turned out. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Of course, it all made sense now. She blamed me for her failed marriage, for the betrayal she had suffered. She couldn't direct that anger at Alex. He was gone, out of her life. So she turned it on the person who was still standing there, still trying to love her despite everything. Me, I didn't know what he was like. I said, my voice cracking, I never would have introduced you if I had known. She shrugged nonchalant. Maybe, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened. I sat back in my chair feeling hollow. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just sad. Sad for the sister I had lost, sad for the relationship we would probably never get back. Claire finished her tea and stood up, brushing imaginary lint off her sweater. Anyway, she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder, it's over now. We can move on. Move on. Like it was that simple. Like everything wasn't shattered. I watched her walk away without looking back. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. I could love someone with all my heart, and it still wouldn't be enough to make them love me the same way back. I spent the rest of the day curled up on the couch at home, staring blankly at the TV. Ethan called a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was I supposed to say? How could I even begin to explain that my sister had set me up like I was some kind of criminal? Being interrogated? Late that night, Mom called. When I picked up, I was hoping, praying she would tell me Claire was wrong, that she shouldn't have done it, that someone, at least one person, was on my side. But instead, she said, Sweetheart, you have to understand Claire's been through a lot. She's just protecting herself. I stared at the wall, the weight of her words pressing down on my chest like a boulder, protecting herself at my expense. I would never hurt her. I whispered, I know. Mom said, but she didn't sound convinced. She sounded tired, like she didn't have the energy to care anymore. And just like that, something inside me cracked a little deeper. The people who were supposed to defend me, to believe me, were the ones excusing what had been done. I wasn't just losing Claire, I was losing all of them. The days after that conversation felt like walking through molasses. Everything moved slowly. Everything hurt. I wanted to pretend things could go back to normal. I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch, a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with time, but deep down I knew better. Every time I picked up my phone and hovered over Claire's name, something in my chest twisted painfully. The image of her sipping tea and smiling while casually admitting to orchestrating my humiliation played on an endless loop in my mind. No, there was no coming back from this. Still a stubborn part of me, the part that still believed in family above all else, clung to hope. When Mom called a few days later inviting me to the next family dinner, she promised Claire wouldn't be there. She even sounded a little sorry. Or maybe I just imagined that because I needed to. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Maybe I thought if I showed up, if I acted normal, we could start repairing the cracks. Maybe if I smiled enough, stayed quiet enough, swallowed my hurt deep enough, they would love me again. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Simple makeup, a soft sweater Claire had once given me for Christmas, back when we still meant something to each other. When I arrived, Dad and Dylan greeted me warmly. For a moment, my heart eased, but then I stepped into the dining room, and there they were. Claire, Mark, smiling like nothing had happened, sitting at the table sipping wine, chatting with Mom as if they belonged there. My stomach dropped. It felt like a trap, an ambush. I froze, instinct screaming at me to run. But before I could move, Claire stood up. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cool. I looked at Mom. She nodded encouragingly, like this was some kind of intervention and I was the problem. Claire crossed her arms over her chest. "You owe me an apology," she said bluntly, "for overreacting, for causing a scene, for making Mark uncomfortable." The room spun. "I owe you," I choked out. She nodded firmly as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Mom chimed in, then her voice maddeningly calm. "Sweetheart, it's better to just apologize and move on. Family is too important." I felt something in me snap. All these years, all the times I had bent over backward to be the good daughter, the good sister, and this was what it got me. No loyalty, no protection, no love, just manipulation, blame, betrayal. I turned to Claire, my voice shaking but clear. "If you really believe I would ever betray you," I said, "then delete my number. Forget I exist." Her face hardened, but I didn't care anymore. I turned to Mom next. "I'm done pretending this is okay." And without another word, I grabbed my coat and walked out into the cold night. The air hit me like a slap sharp and biting, but for the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. At home, I collapsed onto the couch, wrapping a blanket tightly around myself like armor. Ethan called, and this time I answered. When he heard what happened, he was furious, but he didn't push, he just listened. That night, lying awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something. Love doesn't always come from the people you expect, and sometimes the hardest but healthiest thing you can do is walk away from the ones who keep hurting you. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who idolized her big sister, who thought family could fix anything. I mourned her that night. I let myself cry ugly and loud for the dreams that would never come true, for the family I thought I had. And then sometime around 3 a.m. in the still broken quiet, I made a promise to myself I would stop chasing love that came with conditions. I would stop apologizing for simply existing. I deserved better. I deserved peace, even if that meant building it from scratch all on my own. The morning after that family dinner, the world felt strangely quiet. I sat by the window sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out at the street as people bustled by, walking dogs, carrying groceries, living lives untouched by betrayal. How did they do it? How did they move through the world without carrying the weight of a family that didn't want them? Ethan texted me around noon. "Come with me. Get away for a little while." At first, I hesitated. Running away felt cowardly. Wasn't I supposed to stay and fight for my family? Wasn't I supposed to forgive, forget, be the bigger person? But then I remembered Claire's face. Cold accusing Mom's silence, Mark's smirk, and suddenly the idea of leaving felt less like running and more like breathing. So I packed a small suitcase, jeans, t-shirts, a worn-out paperback novel, and I boarded a plane to meet Ethan halfway across the country where he was finishing up a work project. The minute I saw him waiting for me at the gate, arms wide open, I burst into tears. Not because I was sad, because for the first time in weeks, maybe months, someone was actually happy to see me. He wrapped me up in his arms, kissed the top of my head, and whispered, "You're safe now." The days that followed were slow and gentle, like a soft rain after a brutal drought. Ethan's parents invited me to stay with them in their cozy house on the edge of a sleepy little town. From the first moment I stepped inside, I felt the difference. No tension, no hidden landmines, just warmth. His mom, a kind woman named Marjorie, fussed over me like I was already her daughter. She baked cookies, insisted I sit and rest those tired eyes, asked questions about my favorite movies and childhood memories like she genuinely cared. His dad, Harold, was quieter but no less welcoming, offering shy smiles and clumsy but sweet gestures like building a fire in the living room. Just because I mentioned I loved the crackle of wood burning, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, it was real. Every day I felt a little piece of my broken heart knit itself back together. We went on long walks through winding parks. Ethan showed me the bookstore he used to hide in as a kid. We had bonfires in the backyard wrapped in blankets, watching the stars blink to life overhead. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I had to be useful to be wanted. I didn't have to fix anything. I didn't have to apologize for simply existing. I just was, and it was enough. One night, sitting under the stars, Ethan turned to me and said, "You know, family isn't just blood, it's who shows up for you." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. I used to think if I just tried harder, I whispered, if I loved them enough, they'd choose me. Ethan squeezed my hand. "They had a choice," he said, "and they made the wrong one. That's on them, not you." Something about hearing it out loud from someone who loved me without conditions made the truth sink a little deeper. I couldn't make Claire see the real me. I couldn't make mom fight for me. I couldn't undo the lies, the betrayal, the way they rewrote our history to suit their guilt. But I could choose who I let into my life moving forward, and I could choose myself. Maybe that was the real test all along. During the trip, Ethan took me to meet some of his old friends. People who had known him since kindergarten, people who didn't look at me like I was damaged goods. One of them, a sweet woman named Annie, pulled me aside after dinner and said, "You have the kindest eyes. I don't know what you've been through, but you're still shining." It broke me in the best way. For so long, I thought my light had gone out completely, but maybe it was just waiting for a place where it could burn safely. And little by little, in that small town with those kind people, my light started to flicker back to life. I wasn't healed yet, not fully. Some nights the memories still crept in: Claire's betrayal, Mom's coldness, the way Mark's eyes had lingered too long. But now when the memories came, they didn't crush me, they didn't define me. They were just scars, reminders of battles fought and survived. I was building something new, something stronger, something that no one could take away from me ever again. Coming back home after that trip felt different. The city was the same, the buzz of traffic, the smell of fresh bagels from the corner shop, the neighbor's dogs barking at the mailman. But I wasn't the same. I was no longer the girl who begged for scraps of love, no longer the sister who waited by the phone for an apology that would never come. I was someone new, someone stronger. Shortly after I returned, Ethan and I sat down and made a decision. We were getting married, but it wouldn't be the grand, flashy wedding my mother had once dreamed up for me. No ballrooms, no white doves, no fake smiles plastered over broken relationships. Instead, we booked a simple courthouse ceremony, 2 witnesses, a handful of friends, just love, raw, honest, and real. It was everything I had ever wanted, even if I hadn't known it before. On the morning of our wedding, I stood in front of the mirror smoothing down a simple ivory dress I had picked out online. No corsets, no sequins, just soft fabric and a heart ready to be fully seen. As I pinned a small flower into my hair, a thought crossed my mind. Claire would have hated this. She would have called it too plain, not special enough, and for once that thought didn't sting. It made me smile because this day wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about finally choosing myself. The ceremony was quick, but perfect. Ethan looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I stumbled over my vows a little because I was crying not out of sadness, but because I had finally found someone who saw all of me and loved me anyway. Afterward, we celebrated at a tiny Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. There were no toasts from family members, no staged family photos, just friends who laughed with us, who lifted glasses in real joy, who loved us without reservation. And it was enough, more than enough. Of course, news of the wedding traveled fast. A few days later, an aunt I barely spoke to called, her voice dripping with condescension. She said she was shocked I had the nerve to invite family after what I had done. That Claire had told everyone I tried to seduce both her husbands, that I was lucky Ethan hadn't left me. At first, I felt the old panic rise, the desperate need to defend myself, to scream the truth into ears that didn't want to hear it. But then I realized it didn't matter. Their lies couldn't touch me anymore. Their opinions weren't my burden to carry, so I thanked her for calling, wished her well, and hung up, simple as that. Later that night, Ethan found me sitting quietly on the balcony watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me, his arm warm around my shoulders. After a while, I spoke. "I think I finally understand." I said, "Understand what?" He asked softly. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you even when it's messy, even when it's hard." He squeezed my hand. "And you?" I added. "You're my family now." He smiled, that soft, crooked smile I loved so much. "You always were." I passe mon terrain. The next few months weren't perfect. There were days the hurt crept back in, triggered by a random song. A whiff of mom's perfume on a stranger, a dream where Claire and I laughed like we used to before everything broke. But healing isn't linear. Some days you take 2 steps forward and some days you trip and fall flat on your face. What matters is that you keep getting up, and I did, over and over. With every sunrise, with every small act of self-kindness, I stitched myself back together. Stronger, softer, wiser. Today, when I think of Claire or Mom or anyone else who chose to believe lies over love, I don't feel rage anymore. I feel nothing, and sometimes nothing is a gift. It means their poison no longer courses through my veins. It means I'm free. I've built a life filled with laughter. Love late night ice cream, runs lazy Sunday mornings, and people who never make me question my worth. I still believe in family. I just believe now that you get to choose who holds that sacred title in your life. If you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed, trying to fix what was already shattered beyond repair? Or would you have walked away choosing peace over pain? I'd love to hear your story, because maybe, just maybe, healing begins when we realize we're not as alone as we think.